And now, stand-up community subscribers and listeners from around the globe, it's time to Stand Up with Pete Dominic, where we ask the important questions that impact you, your family, and your community. Such as, could Peppa Pig ever have an abortion? And will the auto experts at Fred Meyer change my tires, but also my colostomy bag? And now, the podcast host whose ultra-tight swimwear manages to double as an aging, moldy fruit basket, Pete Dominic.
Yes, thank you, Pete Co, for that very disturbing opening. Let's talk about not including colostomy bag and abortion at the top of the show, just because we want to set the right tone. You know what I mean, Pete? I love him. Love that guy. Thank you very much. And by the way, I love a lot of guys. I spent 3 days with 17 of my high school buddies, guys I haven't seen for almost 30 years, and the love was flowing. Let me tell you. I hope that you have a handful of friends from any period of time in your life that you get together with on any type of regular, annual, or more basis, because I felt lucky. That's what I want to say. I'm so excited to have so many new friends that I've made through this program and the community that we've built together. And I hope that we can keep building it together. I hope that we can get together now that there isn't a deadly virus flowing in our communities. I'm looking forward to that. And I want to build new relationships with more of you and help you build those relationships with each other. And I think that's part of the direction that this show is definitely going to go in, talking about our lives and our journeys and learning from people and commiserating with each other and helping each other out with different ideas and solutions. I'm going to spend a lot more time talking with people about their lives and what they've overcome and how they've overcome it. And I do that a lot with my guest comedian, Maz Jobrani, today. We talked about our journeys and our lives and our careers in comedy. Maz has been on before, once before a while ago, and I'm very excited that he is my guest today on the Monday show. Comedian Maz Jobrani joining me. But yeah, had an awesome weekend and reunion with my buddies. We had so much fun. The laughter was flowing just like the liquor, the food, and a tremendous amount of cannabis. I mean, it's everywhere now. So guys were bringing edibles and vape pens and weed from every state. It was hilarious. And so we had a great time together. Nobody got hurt. And nobody even tried to get hurt. We bowled. Some guys went golfing. We played cornhole, you know, the sandbag thing. Not what you think, you dirty, filthy people. I had a great time, and I'm looking forward to doing that again with those guys and hopefully with some of you, because there's so many of you that I've met and connected with, and we've got to get together. So we'll keep talking on this journey together. I'm so happy to have you along, supporting me. If you haven't signed up to be a part of our community or to support the podcast, please do. Please sign up for a paid subscription right now, because this is all I'm doing. 5 days a week, every day, new podcast, and we open with the news. I've already talked far too long, but I just can't get over how great of a weekend it was and how much forward I am looking, the clunky sentence, to having more of that, hopefully with many of you in the future. Oh my gosh, the music even ran out. Yeah, I think that means it's time to get to the news. Let's take a look at the last 24. Oh, wow. Well, I've got a lot to play for you from the Sunday shows, and a lot of attention, of course, being paid to the president of America, who is Joe Biden's overseas trip. He's got the G7 that wrapped up. He hung out with the Queen. He's got a NATO summit. And he's also going to meet with a couple of other world leaders, including the leader of Turkey, Erdogan. That should be interesting. And a lot of folks talking about and paying attention to his meeting this Wednesday with Vladimir Putin. And so let's just go through a little bit of that to get you up to speed as much as we can on Joe Biden's big overseas adventure. Here he is being asked about that upcoming Wednesday summit with Vladimir Putin.
President Vladimir Putin, thank you. Vladimir Putin, who you'll be seeing in a few days in Geneva, said just a couple of days ago that he believed that U.S.-Russia relations were at a low point. In what concrete ways could your summit change that? And then secondly, on the same topic, you have said previously and in the run-up to the summit that you would be unafraid to call out Russia's disruptive actions like cyber hacks, Ukraine, election interference. But you're not having a joint press conference with Putin. Why not take the chance to stand side by side with him and say those things to him with the world watching?
Well, let me make it clear. I think he's right. It's a low point. And it depends on how he responds to acting consistent with international norms, which in many cases he has not. As I told him when I was running and when I got elected, before I was sworn in, that I was going to find out whether or not he in fact did engage in trying to interfere in our election, that I was going to take a look at whether he was involved in a cybersecurity breach that occurred, et cetera. And if I did, I was going to respond. I did. I checked it out, so I had access to all the intelligence. He was engaged in those activities. I did respond and made it clear that I'd respond again. With regard to, I always found, and I don't mean to suggest that the press should not know, but this is not a contest about who can do better in front of a press conference or try to embarrass each other. It's about making myself very clear what the conditions are to get a better relationship are with Russia. We're not looking for conflict. We are looking to resolve those actions which we think are inconsistent with international norms, number one. Number two, where we can work together, we may be able to do that in terms of some strategic doctrine that may be able to be worked together. We're ready to do it. And there may be other areas. There's even talk there may be an ability to work together on climate. So the bottom line is that I think the best way to deal with this is for he and I to meet, he and I to have our discussion. I know you don't doubt that I'll be very straightforward with him about our concerns, and I will make clear my view of how that meeting turned out, and he'll make clear how from his perspective, how it turned out. But I don't want to get into being diverted by did they shake hands, how far did they talk, who talked the most, and the rest. Now, he can say what he said the meeting was about, and I will say what I think the meeting was about. That's how I'm going to handle it.
All right, Joe Biden taking a question about his upcoming, that's Wednesday, meeting with Vladimir Putin. Should be interesting, of course. At least it doesn't work for him as a secret agent, like it seems like the last guy did, or at best, admire him a lot. Nope, Biden thinks he's a killer. But to be fair, so did Donald Trump. All right, leaders of the Group of Seven wrapped up the summit on Sunday. They talked about the coronavirus pandemic, climate change, China. President Biden met with all these foreign leaders, Emmanuel Macron. They pushed for a more unified approach to combating the pandemic. The New York Times reports that leaders are expected to sign a declaration on global health intended to ensure that the pandemic's toll is never repeated. Also, to counter China's influence, Biden urged European nations and Japan to offer hundreds of billions in loans to developing nations. While the countries agree that China's influence is worrisome, how they'll come together in the next steps is unclear. A lot of talk about this on the Sunday shows as well with the foreign policy experts. And let me play some of that for you. But President Biden heading to Brussels for a NATO meeting today before sitting down, like I said, with Putin in Geneva on Wednesday. I don't know why I said Putin like that. Putin. But here is foreign policy analyst Ian Bremmer on MSNBC's Velshi. He is the president of the Eurasia Group, and this is what he had to say about the differences within the G7 vis-a-vis China.
The one place that you have very significant disagreement in the G7 is on China. And that is because for the United States, China is by far the most significant national security threat. And that is a bipartisan issue of agreement. The Europeans see the Chinese primarily through an economic and commercial, not a national security lens. And so the idea that the orientation towards China is what is going to solidify a G7 alliance of democracies, that's not on. That's not remotely happening. So either we're going to have to adjust the way we think about our aspirations of multilateralism on China, or you're going to start to see much more significant divides.
Well, that's just one piece of analysis from Ian Bremmer. And then the G7 countries put out a statement trying to get China to behave a little better. And China's like, shut up. That's not how the world works anyway. There's no little groups of countries. There's only the UN. And that is how I paraphrased a very complex, important set of statements. And I know nothing, but I am confused and interested. Hopefully you are as well, and that's why you're listening. All right, well, let's move on. G7 was in Cornwall in the United Kingdom, and so the great Sir David Attenborough, spoke to G7 leaders about how the world can tackle climate change together, and they put out this video, which I really liked. It's got music, and it's inspiring, and it made me feel like we could actually tackle climate change together. Here is the great David Attenborough.
Our scientific collaboration on COVID treatment and vaccines showed just how much we can achieve together when the goal is clear and urgent. We know in detail what is happening to our planet, and we know many of the things we need to do during this decade. Tackling climate change is now as much a political and communications challenge as it is a scientific or technological one. We have the skills to address it in time. All we need is the global will to do so.
All right, there you go. UN Climate Change Conference UK 2021. All right.
Our scientific collaboration on COVID.
Oh, it started playing again. I just love his voice so much. I'm leaving it in. Big news out of Israel, where the Israeli parliament ousts Benjamin Netanyahu, ending his 12-year rule as the Israeli prime minister. A lot of reporting about that. Let me just play for you this comprehensive 2-minute clip from Reuters, who I think does a good job. The Reuters reporter at Reuters reporting on just what happened in Israel.
In an improbable scenario few could have imagined, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's record 12-year run ended on Sunday, with Parliament approving a so-called government of change led by nationalist Naftali Bennett. The newly elected coalition, consisting of left-wing, centrist, right-wing, and Arab parties, was voted in by a razor-thin margin, with little in common except the desire to unseat Netanyahu, underscoring its likely fragility. Addressing Parliament before Bennett was sworn in, a combative Netanyahu indicated he isn't exiting quietly, saying, quote, "If we are destined to go into the opposition, we will do so with our heads held high until we can topple it," adding that would happen, quote, "sooner than people think." Interrupted by nonstop shouts of liar and shame from Netanyahu loyalists in Parliament, Bennett thanked the former prime minister for his, quote, "lengthy and achievement-filled service on behalf of the state of Israel." Netanyahu is Israel's longest-serving leader, having also served a first term from 1996 to 1999. But he was weakened by his repeated failure to clinch victory in 4 elections over the past 2 years, including a vote in March, and by an ongoing corruption trial in which he has denied any wrongdoing. Israel and Palestinian militant group Hamas also engaged in over a week of intense warfare last month, with both sides criticized for civilian casualties. Under the coalition deal, Bennett, an Orthodox Jew and tech millionaire, will be replaced as prime minister by centrist Yair Lapid, a popular former television host, in 2023. The new government largely plans to avoid sweeping moves on hot-button international issues, such as policy toward the Palestinians, and to focus instead on domestic reforms. U.S. President Joe Biden congratulated Bennett, Lapid, and the rest of the new cabinet, and said he looked forward to working with Bennett to strengthen the, quote, close and enduring relationship between their two countries.
Okay, thank you to Reuters for catching us up on what is going on with Israeli domestic politics in Parliament. A major power change there, and obviously you can be very interested to see what happens. All right, let's move on to some of the other sound I've got for you from the Sunday shows. I thought this was interesting. Andy Slavitt has a new book out, and he was on Face a Nation. Slavitt was an advisor to Joe Biden on the pandemic, and he made the argument that the coronavirus pandemic would have happened regardless of Donald Trump, but the former president's administration committed 3 deadly sins that made the health crisis worse.
So we would have had a pandemic without the Trump administration. But there were 3, I think, deadly sins that the Trump administration made that played out. The first was his power that he believed to deny the very existence of the virus or the potency of it, and to get his followers to go along with it. If he simply hadn't done that and simply said, "Hey, we've got a problem," we would have been in a very different situation. The second was his quashing of dissent. As I laid out in the book that comes out, early in this pandemic, in February, they sent out orders to the Department of Health and Human Services for 45 days. They were not even allowed to talk to the press, simply because Alex Azar wanted to say the expression that things were going fine but could change rapidly. And that, whether it was that or Nancy Messonnier or Tony Fauci, anybody that disagreed with the narrative the president wanted was squashed. And then the third was I think, really almost extra credit, was taking the divisions in the country and playing into them. And I think the populist nature, being a populist during a pandemic is really not a great combination, because you're going to have to make some tough decisions. You're going to have to make people unhappy. And I think Trump saw in his base a stirring of anti-mask characterizations and other things. And he played into those things because I think he felt like a different route. And I think those three things were things that were cost us a lot of lives.
In the last 20 seconds here, the Wuhan lab leak, if the United States had just assumed it had come out of a lab, would there have been any way in which the response would have been different to the actual virus?
I'm not sure about that. I don't think so. Look, I think we should be, first of all, nobody knows what's happened yet. We need this investigated. We need China to be forthcoming, and we need to be very forceful about it. But to this point, nobody really knows what happened. There are cases to be made on both sides. I agree with Dr. Gottlieb in his perspective that you got characterizations that could go either way. Interesting anecdote in the book where this was all explained to President Trump through a bedtime story. So that may be a part of the book that would kind of reflects on how he was thinking about this.
Well, that is a terrifying scenario that it had to be explained to Donald Trump as like a bedtime story. John Dickerson also always asking good questions, asking what was the one big preventable mistake that was made?
Well, John, I think it's easy to see some of the technical mistakes we made as a country, not with the CDC not having enough tests and not enough face masks and so forth. But we also have to acknowledge the fact that we made some political mistakes. And while this isn't primarily a political book, a culture of denying science, denying the very virus and sowing divisions wasn't helpful. But I would argue that perhaps the thing we have to be most concerned about and most focused on are what role we all played. This was a incredibly difficult period of time. But when we look at one another, the question is, did we do enough? Did we sacrifice even a little bit for the health and for the business and for others? We are a generation that has not sacrificed in a long, long time in this country. And I think, we all have to acknowledge that despite everything else, the technical and the political, we all played a role in this, too.
Ooh, I thought that was a very, very insightful comment. I definitely want to get that book and get Andy Slavitt on this podcast to talk about it. All right, now I want to take you over to MSNBC, where Mehdi Hasan on his show Sunday night asked Beto O'Rourke if he believes Democrats in Washington, D.C. are acting urgently enough over the Republican assault on voting rights. Here's Beto O'Rourke on Mehdi Hasan's MSNBC show.
Straight question. Do you believe the Democrats in D.C. are taking this seriously or urgently enough?
Absolutely not. But I can't just worry about that or complain about that. I've got to do my part to push them. And that's why we're traveling the state of Texas, red counties and blue, urban and rural, bringing people out. We want to give President Biden the power to do the right thing. This could not be more critical, because if we fail this summer, we may not get democracy back. Because you're right, Mehdi. These voter suppression bills will roll forward in the special session in Texas. They'll happen in the other more than 40 states that are considering them. And what Abraham Lincoln called the last best hope of Earth will perish from the planet. It's that serious. And that's why we've got to do all we can with all we've got where we are. And that describes us here in Texas.
All right, now let's go to the latest. I'll give you a clip from CNN State of the Union, where Dana Bash had Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez on to ask her about whether or not she would vote for the infrastructure package if it wasn't quite where she thought it needed to be. And here is that.
Do you vote yes or no on that package if it comes before you in the House?
You know, I think from what we've seen so far, and particularly the lack of climate action as well, I think adding to the severe lowering of our scope and scale in what we're seeking to do on ambition, I doubt it, frankly, in the current state of that proposal. And I think one of the things that's really important to communicate is that this isn't just 1.7 trillion. This is about an overall investment spread out over anywhere between 8 to 10 years, which is a very, very low amount of money. It's not going to create the millions of union jobs that we need in this country, particularly to recover from the pandemic. And it's not going to get us closer to meeting our climate goals, which are crucially important at this point in time.
And let's wrap it up for the Sunday shows with Fox News' Chris Wallace, who did a good job pushing the former Secretary of State and unpopped popcorn Colonel Mike Pompeo to explain why the Trump administration was unable to press China more for evidence on the origins of the coronavirus while they were in office. Because they didn't.
You also criticize President Biden for not pushing hard enough on China to learn the origins of the coronavirus. But I want to again go back to your administration and the record there. President Trump and his team, including you, had almost a year after the COVID-19 first came on the scene to really press Beijing on what the origins were when the evidence was much fresher. Now, there's no question that the president pulled back from the WHO, the World Health Organization. But what did President Trump and his administration, including his Secretary of State, do to press China harder to get the evidence on where the COVID-19 virus came from? Because we still don't know.
Chris, the predicate of your question is all wrong. We have a really good idea what happened here. There is an enormous amount of evidence that there was a leak from the Wuhan Institute of Virology. There's a pile of evidence 100 feet high.
And then guess what? Believe it or not, you can go watch the clip for yourself. He doesn't provide any of that evidence. Could be true. Maybe it was accidentally leaked out of that lab. But if there's all that evidence, why don't you show it? Why don't you show it to us? What am I missing? All right. That is some of the looks at the Sunday shows, the last 24-hour in audio. And now I will run through a whole bunch of other headlines, rapid fire, that are important and maybe undercovered and interesting and maybe funny and maybe scary. And it's all every day right here on the News Dump.
Ravens at the Costco cart pecking at your stuff. They're making off with your groceries on today's News Dump.
Yeah, one of my all-time favorites from Pico. Thank you, as always, sir. Okay, let's start with a headline that really matters. This is coming out of Houston, where a hospital there suspended 178 employees without pay for 14 days last week for failing to comply with the vaccine mandate. So a whole bunch of people decided that worked at a hospital did not want to get vaccinated against COVID-19. And a federal judge on Saturday dismissed a lawsuit brought by 117 of the hospital staff over that policy requiring employees to get vaccinated. The U.S. District Judge Lynn Hughes noted in the ruling that the federal government has advised that companies can require workers to get vaccines. He rejected the lawsuit's argument that the mandate at a hospital in Houston, Texas, was unlawful. He said, the judge did in this case, this is not coercion. Methodist is trying to do their business of saving lives without giving them the COVID-19 virus. It is a choice made to keep staff, patients, and their families safer. And the judge also called the plaintiff's argument equating the injection requirement to medical experimentation in Nazi concentration camps. He referred to that comparison as, quote, reprehensible. Houston Methodist said in an email statement that it was pleased that the judge dismissed the, quote, frivolous lawsuit that falsely claimed COVID-19 vaccines were unsafe. So this is a big deal and sets precedent for similar institutions, hospitals in this case, colleges, from doing the same thing. All right. A much less important story, but one I do have to report to you, comes from TheWrap.com, whose headline reads, NBC shit show. Ultimate Slip and Slide production shut down over explosive diarrhea outbreak. Yeah, NBC's Ultimate Slip and Slide just became the ultimate shit show. The upcoming TV competition series, adapted from the classic backyard water slide Wemo, has shut down indefinitely after up to 40 crew members felt violently ill during production on a remote ranch in Simi Valley, California. According to a person with knowledge of the production, the outbreak of, quote, awful explosive diarrhea left people collapsing on set and being forced to run into porta potties. Oh, thank you for that story, TheWrap.com. And the winning bidder got a seat aboard Blue Origin's first human space flight scheduled to take off July 20th. Somebody bid $28 million to see space. The live auction lasted under 10 minutes on Saturday after opening at $4.9 million with over 20 bidders calling in. The winning bid will be donated to Blue Origin's Foundation Club for the Future, which inspires future generations to pursue careers in STEM. Okay, I guess that's a good thing. The top dog was named over the weekend. The Westminster Dog Kennel Club dog show apparently took place. And the flavor of the year was wasabi. Yeah, a Pekingese dog named Wasabi won Best Show in Sunday night, notching a 5th ever win for the unmistakable toy breed, according to ABCnews.com. A Whippet named Bourbon repeated as runner-up. What? Did I just read that sentence? A Whippet named Bourbon repeated as runner-up. Okay, there you go. That's the Westminster Kennel Club Dog Show. Did anybody watch that? Do I have any listeners who watch that or have any thoughts or ideas, jokes about that? Seems weird. There's some new polling that I don't know if this really matters, but I thought it was interesting. In the midst of his first foreign trip now, President Biden getting a lot of attention, obviously, in his first foreign trip, he finds a majority of American public has a great deal or a good amount of trust in him to negotiate on the country's behalf with other world leaders. I'm not sure if that poll was asked to climate activists what they'd say, but that is a general question, apparently, that's being polled out. Does that matter to anybody? Well, if that doesn't, this should. There's a whole series of reports that are hard to keep up with, but basically that the Trump-era Department of Justice Department, monitored and pursued private information on journalists and Democratic lawmakers. Now, this is a huge story. The headline, Trump Justice Department subpoenaed information from White House counsel Don McGahn's Apple account. This is so important. I'll definitely get a guest on to talk about this week, how unprecedented it is, why it matters. Really big news that is being revealed now by journalists, and we're obviously going to learn so much more crazy shit that happened during the 4 years that a reality show, corrupt grifter of a man, was leading the richest country in the world. All right, here is another, I think this is a good story. A federal board has voted to remove the word Negro from the names of over a dozen Texas geographic locations, according to CNN. The U.S. Board on Geographic Names approved the proposal Thursday to rename 16 geographical features in Texas that include that word. And the Texas Tribune says the change to the names of features such as lakes and valleys comes 30 years after the state legislature last tried to remove the word from maps. All right, and I think that's what you call progress. And it's also surprising to hear that the word was used so many times still. But hey, it's Texas. Let's go to someplace even less good than that in terms of civil and human rights. And it's Saudi Arabia. Under pressure, Saudi Arabia has granted new rights to women. Male guardians no longer have to approve of their independent living. Saudi Arabia has expanded the rights of women by changing a law so that they no longer need the approval of a male guardian to live alone. A provision has been removed from the guardianship laws that said an adult woman who is single, divorced, or widowed is to be turned over to a male. How about that for another story that is late, but still progress? That's just crazy. And finally, in the news dump, here's a fun story out of Chicago where a bus driver who apparently was looking for a way to relieve stress during the coronavirus pandemic jumped into Lake Michigan for the 365th straight day on Saturday. His name is Dan O'Connor. Started jumping into the lake to deal apparently with stress. It was during the pandemic, he said. It was during the protest. It was during an election year. So it was somewhere where I could come down here and block out all that noise and kind of be totally present with me in the lake and find some moments of zen. So he kept jumping in the lake through the fall, and then he hacked a hole apparently in the frozen lake that was big enough for him to jump through. And on Saturday, he celebrated a year of doing that. And I say, congratulations, Dan O'Connor. You didn't hurt anybody. You entertained a lot of people by posting it on social media, and people related to you, and it was great. So congratulations. You're crazy, but that's cool, and you do you, and I love it. Dan O'Connor. And that is today's news dump and last 24. Thank you for joining me here for the news, which you do every day, but usually on Friday when I usually still have the 2 guests. But today, only one, and I'm very excited he is the one because he is a really old friend of mine, good friend of mine. Actually, we don't go that far back, Maz Jobrani and I. But we've crossed paths a lot of times at Sirius, as well as at the Aspen Ideas Festival and other places as well, comedy clubs. But Maz Jobrani is one of my favorite stand-up comedians, and he's got a great podcast called Back to School. He is an actor as well, and I just love this guy. You can follow him on social media, on Twitter. You can watch his specials on Netflix, and check him out, mazjobrani.com. It was great to catch up with him. Like I said, I want to talk to more people about the journey and how they are navigating it all of life, the problems, the triumphs, the good, the bad, all of it. And general conversations about life, and with smart, and in this case, very funny people as well. Maz is just a great guy. I like him a lot, and I think you are going to as well if you don't already. Here we go with today's guest, comedian Maz Jobrani. All right, there he is, one of my all-time favorite human beings, stand-up comedians, thinkers, men. Maz Jobrani, everybody. Welcome back to Stand Up. Great to see you via virtual link still.
Brother, when I see you, I feel like it's like literally a brother. Like we have, not only do we have the same head, but I just, you're one of the guys that I really, really love. So good to see you, man. I'll give you a virtual hug. Like I'm going to hug my computer real quick.
I feel it. You smell good.
You smell. I'm sorry. I went too low. I didn't mean to touch you there.
No, that's fine. It's good to be touched, man. It's been ages since I've been touched by another man or woman. So
let me ask you a question. Did you and your wife throughout the pandemic like my wife and I, if somebody gets sick in the house, I won't say I'm a germaphobe, but suddenly I'm not kissing anybody in the house, because even though it's like my son who's sick or my daughter who's sick, I tell my wife, I don't know, we could be, let's just stop this insanity.
Yeah. Well, there's not a lot of physical affection in my marriage.
Not at all. Okay, that's good.
No, okay. not at all. My wife, we don't share a bedroom, so that's one really. We
don't either.
Yeah, I think that's I'm happy to talk about that for 6 hours because I fully endorse it and promote it. It's not for everybody, but it's a weird thing to sleep with someone every night, and especially when you have different bedtimes and different sleep needs. Like my wife is a very sensitive sleeper, and I'm not. I'll sleep anywhere regardless of what's going on. I can sleep. My wife, not so much. So I hate to disturb her. So therefore it kind of creates this natural barrier that we're not exchanging. But we both have this, my whole family has this summer cold. I've been complaining for over a week. It's been here for a long time too. We're all vaccinated.
My daughter got the cold. She got the stomach flu and the cold. But what's interesting is like you were just saying, I love when I am able to hug my wife, kiss my wife, whatever, I love it. Like she's very kissable and huggable and all. But when the pandemic hit, I think everybody was so paranoid. Yeah. Nobody was, if you left the house for a minute, you didn't have to quarantine, but for like the next 2 or 3 days, there was a lot of suspicious looks. Like, I don't know if I want to get close to you.
How many people in your house?
Just the 4 of us. For now, we got a dog, so there's 5 of us. So,
you got a pandemic dog?
We have a pandemic puppy. We did it.
Oh, you're one of those people. What was the final decision there?
It's been one of the best things I've ever done.
Yeah.
I was never a pet person, right? Because I grew up. So my background with the Iranian immigrant family, dogs just weren't a big part of our culture. So there was a couple of times
where down upon.
We ate them, but besides that,
all kinds or just certain breeds.
You know those kebabs that you have at the Persian restaurant?
Those are doggy?
Dog bobs. They become dog bobs. No. It just wasn't a big, like in Iran, there's, at least when I was a kid, it was like wild dogs, but very few people actually went and owned a dog. I used to talk about this in my stand-up now. Like my dad got me a rooster, but it wasn't like a pet, like you go play with. It was just like, oh, our beach house has a rooster. And I would hear the rooster sometimes. I don't even remember seeing the rooster, but never had a dog until I came to America, wanted a dog, got a dog for a couple of days. My dad had a friend of his who had 2 dogs, and he convinced the guy to give us one of the 2 dogs. I don't know if it was a convincing or if it was like, hey, can I have one of your dogs? And the guy's like, sure. But nobody thought like, oh, they're going to miss each other. So this dog comes and he's the saddest dog for 2 days. And eventually my dad's like, just give the dog back. So I gave the dog back. And
what?
So didn't have a dog until actually one more instance. My wife, because I was touring early on in the touring, she was like, I should get a dog. So someone was at like an adopt a dog day, and a friend of hers and was like, oh, I found a Jack Russell Terrier. I brought it for you. My wife wasn't a dog person. I wasn't a dog person. Anybody doesn't, if you don't know what Jack Russell Terriers do, it's like the Tasmanian devil. They won't stop. So if you're not a dog person, that's the wrong dog to start with. We had that dog for 2 weeks and found an actual dog person and gave that dog away. Fast forward, pandemic, we're sitting there watching TV. My wife's on the Instagram looking at golden doodle breeders because my daughter's got some allergies. So we need a hypoallergenic dog. She goes, should we get this dog? And I go, listen, we're doing construction in the back and it's a pandemic going on and there's a lot happening. It's not the right time to get a dog. She's like, well, when is it ever going to be? You never say it's the right. When is it ever going to be the right time? And I was like, you already know the answer. Then why are you asking me? Like, why are you involving me? So then she comes with this one. She goes, let's just go look at the dog. It's a 2-hour drive to go. Yeah, I'm going to go look at a little puppy. And be like,
you're getting it. You must have known. I mean, I don't know your marriage, but you go in 2 hours to look at the dog. You're coming home with a dog.
Nobody goes to look at a dog. Are you kidding me? I mean, if she had said, look, there's a dog that's 13 years old and it's on its last legs and they need someone to just be with it for a couple months, let's go look. Okay. You don't go look at a puppy. She said, let's go look at these golden doodle puppy. I mean, with your kids. And of course I knew we're coming home with it. I was like, well, let's just go do this. How much? You guys take credit card? Great. Here's a credit card. Let's get out of here.
How is so you got a dog? That's a huge change. But how has your pandemic been like overall? And how are you doing coming out of it? I'm one of those people who I really enjoyed it. My show took off. I enjoyed the work. I like staying home. I was already in transition with my life anyway, and I've enjoyed it. And so now I'm having some kind of anxiety coming out. I'm one of those people who doesn't really want to go back. It's not that I'm, I don't have that social anxiety. I talk to people all the time. I like being with people, but I just kind of like this lifestyle. So how did you do, and how are you doing coming out of it?
We're pretty resilient. The kids are good. They go to these schools that were right on it. Like by week 2, they were up with the Zoom. They're going. My wife was working. So we got pretty good at what you just said, pandemic life. Obviously, I was grounded in terms of from my touring because I was so used to touring. And so it was a good break from that. And there was definitely, it was nice. Like I'll say this. I was watching this video. This guy breaks it down. He's a psychiatrist at UCSF. And he goes, look, there's pleasure and there's happiness. And pleasure feeds the dopamine, your brain, and you get this good feeling for whatever it was, the drink, the gambling, the sex, the whatever that pleasure was. And then you want it again. And you want it again, and you want it again. But the neurons get smaller and smaller, and they start dying off. So you need more and more and more, and that leads to addiction. They talk about happiness, and happiness was saying the serotonin and how it shoots this neuron that gets very different kind of feeling, and it's deeper. And I started thinking about it. I was like, I feel like I worked towards happiness more this past year when it came to like walking with the family, taking the dog for a walk, watching movies with the family, being around the family more. Just was definitely of it, and not being on the run all the time. When you're touring, it's like leave on a Thursday, come back on a Sunday, So it was nice. It was nice in that sense. As we come out of it, yeah, I think there's a little bit of anxiety, especially because we don't know, half the country's vaccinated, half isn't, masks, this, all that stuff. And also I think the bigger thing for me with stand-up that was interesting was I quickly transitioned to doing Zoom shows. I did drive-in shows. I did shows indoors in Arizona and as well as in Florida, just to be able to say I tried all of it. I wanted to be able to say I tried all of it. And I got pretty good with the Zoom shows. Zoom shows were like, I got good at, in the middle of my show, surfing the gallery and finding the guy who's on his phone and going like, "Hey, Pete, what are you doing?"
I like that.
Well, crowd work. It was fun. And I was good at it. And also there's certain jokes you can do where when there's a video camera, you do a joke. Like I do a joke about how I hated doing Zoom shows because I would try to watch the other person, but I kept seeing myself and all my faults. And I kept like going up to the camera going like, why are my eyes closing like that? I need plastic surgery. Where'd my eyebrows go? Why am I so ugly? Like just analyzing myself during the Zoom. So that works on the computer. Now you go into the real world.
Yeah.
Some of those jokes don't work as well. And I recently had this experience because a lot of my jokes obviously had to do with the pandemic, right? And and it's very like, it's always very current. Like, I did a joke the other week at the Comedy Store that felt good because it had just happened. I went on stage and I like had my mask in my pocket. And I was like, am I the only one who feels they lifted the mask mandate a little too quickly? It was like 3:00 on a Wednesday and they were like, just stop wearing masks. They were like, they didn't feel like they gathered us around and be like, we have a special announcement to make. It just kind of happened in the middle of the day. And the audience was with me because they just experienced the same thing. Right. And then I talked about how like, I was like, I go, every time I think this pandemic's over, Dr. Fauci shows up. He's like, if you had 1 shot, wear 2 masks. If you had 3 shots, wear 4 masks. But it was right then and there and it felt good. And the audience is laughing. And I'm like, oh my God, my stuff is great. And then I had a show in Dubai for this comedy festival. And I flew out there.
When?
This was like 2-3 weeks ago.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so go there, do the show. And the first thing in my mind is like, okay, wait a minute. Are they going to, when I mention Dr. Fauci, are they going to know what I'm talking about? Are they going to know the lift of the mask mandate? Because over there, they're still wearing masks. They're not going by CDC guidelines. They got their own, whatever it is. Are they going to know a lot of these references? And there was some of the stuff that translated, some of the stuff didn't. And then in the back of my mind, I was like, oh, okay, I see. So my set right now is very American centric. That's what I thought. Then I went to North Carolina to do shows at Raleigh, at the Raleigh Improv. And I was doing the jokes. And again, our lockdown was very different than the North Carolina lockdown because I was talking about, I was like, okay, you guys who had kids doing Zoom school? And there was a guy sitting in the front row. He's like, no, my kids went to school the whole time.
Yeah.
I go, what do you mean the whole time? He goes, the whole time.
Yeah.
I didn't know that was a thing. I was like, wait a minute. He goes, yeah. And so then some of the jokes that hit really hard in LA just weren't hitting as hard in North Carolina. I go, oh, wait a minute. I have a Los Angeles centric set. And then just last night, I did a show in Pasadena in front of a bunch of Armenians, and they weren't into a lot of that stuff. I was like, oh, I'm not funny.
It's interesting because it illustrates the different experiences that people had with the same issue, the pandemic, and yet, you think all those things, we had a similar experience, but yeah, definitely people a lot of people did their own thing, yet I wonder when you went to Dubai, what they think about, or anywhere else in the world, what they think about us now. Like, I wonder how much has changed about the way the rest of the world views America based on Trump, based on the insurrection, and based on our reaction to COVID and denial of it, much less the anti-mask stuff. I mean, there's some segment of that in every culture, the anti-mask stuff, the conspiracy stuff. But I wonder, Can you speak to it all, how the rest of the world is looking at it?
There was 2 tracks on that. No, the first track, again, you realize that America, we're land of the free, but also that allows our smartest to talk, but it also allows our dumbest to talk.
Yeah, stick a key to your face and it'll magnetize because of the vaccine. That's my latest.
A key to your face? What is it?
You haven't seen these videos? People say that there's metal in the vaccines, which is why you can take a key or a metal barrette and stick it, and it sticks to you because.
Oh yeah.
I
saw one of those. So stupid. But so the one conversation I had with somebody there, because we had anti-maskers before the anti-vaxxers. The anti-vaxxers were before, but you know what I'm saying. We had the anti-maskers protesting, and I asked the guy, I go, did you guys in the United Arab Emirates in Dubai, did you guys have any anti-mask protests? They're like, no, we didn't have that. And then I realized, wait a minute, they can't do that because if they did that, first of all, there's a lot of people that are foreigners who live there, who are expats. So if they protest against the government, they'd be like, oh, here you go, you're on this plane, get out of here. They would kick them out.
More authoritarian.
And secondly, and the locals wouldn't protest because they fear it. So there was no anti-mask protest. And I go, oh my God, you don't have to deal with that craziness. That doesn't mean that craziness was not there, because the world we're living in now, and here's the second part of it, the world we're living in now has so many people that are conspiracy theorists. So there was a guy I ran into who I did a thing with, and I go, did you get the vaccine? He's like, no, I'm not getting the vaccine. I go, why not? And he goes, because there just hasn't been enough research. Now, I kind of understand that, because he didn't say they're going to put a chip in me. But I realized then and there that there's probably, even though the UAE is one of the more vaccinated places, very well vaccinated, that's why they're able to have these shows. There are now crazy conspiracy theorists everywhere. Yeah. And they all believe the government's going to do something, put a chip in you, they're coming to get you. I was thinking about this today. Like, there's the vaccines, there's this UFO talk, and there's the elections. It's like the perfect season for conspiracy theorists. It's like, it's just all out there.
I wish, I wish it were not a season, though. Seasons come and go. They change. But I just feel like we're just getting more and more crazy because people they get 5,000 networks and quote experts that they trust. And there's been a huge growing distrust of experts and institutions. And so people can kind of believe whatever they want to believe, that the Democratic Party is eating babies, that there's no COVID, and of course it was led by Donald Trump. That was always my fear, Maz. I was at the RNC in 2016, and the summer of 2016, I was there and I was interviewing Trump supporters. He was the nominee. And I said, aren't you disturbed by all the conspiracy theories? That was always my go-to with early Trump supporters. And they acted like they didn't know what they were. Often when I'd ask them, like, I didn't know he believed that, whatever. But I was always most worried about that. I guess maybe I didn't think he would be this crazy when it came to COVID. But when you think about all of the things that he said and made people believe about COVID and science, much less the election, I wonder when you're doing stand up now, who you think's in the audience? Like, do these people believe in gravity, evolution? Marjorie Taylor Greene yesterday said, I don't believe in evolution.
Well, who said they don't believe in
Marjorie
evolution?
Taylor Greene. She told my good friend Steve Bannon.
Of course.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, it's did you watch this the documentary on HBO, Q Into the Storm?
I didn't watch it. I heard
You're
about
gonna
it.
want to watch it. You're gonna want to watch it. It's great. I honestly, this guy did a great job because he goes ahead and he basically entrenches himself with these guys who he's like, which one of you is Q? And he basically gets to that place. But throughout it, he's showing what you were just talking about. The people on these message boards, it's sick how when, for example, the guy goes down to the New Zealand and he goes on a rampage in that mosque, and there's people commenting and celebrating that on these 8chan and 4chan, and you go, my God, there's people like this that exist. And so it's really scary. You're absolutely right. I mean, Trump is, obviously he is a conspiracy theorist. I actually interviewed Michael Cohen. I don't know if you've talked to him or not.
No.
But I had him on my show. And I asked him, I said, do you think he believes in conspiracy theories? He said that, no, I think he's manipulating all this stuff. He goes, when he first did his first tweet about Obama being a birther and he saw the positive reaction that he got, he goes, I saw the light bulb go off in his face, and he was in his mind. It was like, oh, that's what I got to do. Like just say crazier and crazier stuff.
Amongst the deplorable characteristics, that's all he has. He has no good characteristics. One of the things that's really interesting, people don't talk about this enough, is how unoriginal he is. And, we're two comedians talking, and if you steal a joke, that's like the worst thing you can do. But Trump steals all of his ideas and memes, and it's like the My Pillow guy comes up with something and he just starts repeating it, and he's been that way about everything. And the crazy thing is, if he was on the phone with Vladimir Putin and Putin told him that it was the Ukrainians who interfered in the election, he started repeating that. He's on the phone with the Chinese leader who said, you know what, when the summer months come, COVID's going to go away, don't even worry about that. He repeated that. He's repeating the propaganda and the lies of foreign leaders, much less the My Pillow guy. He hasn't come up with any of it himself. He just knows it'll work. And so he steals it and he repeats it over and over. That's another just deplorable.
We're not psychoanalysts, but if you look at his childhood, you are. But he was handed the business basically by the dad, and he was programmed to be what he is. So he is. You're right. He's not an original thinker. He's not Tesla. He's not he's not some outside the box thinker. He's the guy who, exactly what you just said, takes other people's ideas and spins them and throws them out, and he's got a big listenership, and he is where he is. But interestingly enough, for the past 4 years, when I would do Trump jokes, I started seeing the people, even in my audience, becoming Trump supporters. Not all, but some.
There's a great clip. There's a great clip, at least one, I watched of you dealing with some person who didn't like what you said, and God, you're just so kind. Really kind and likable. That's the thing about you. Like you don't strike me as a guy who ever really gets angry and screaming at people. But you had to navigate yourself through that, and you were so compassionate. But go ahead.
Well, that was the evolution of it. So what had happened was the first time somebody yelled at me about Trump, I ended up in a debate with the guy at the Melrose Improv here in Hollywood, and we were debating back and forth. And at one point, I turned to the audience, and the audience was like, "What happened to the show?" And I was like, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry, I got derailed." And that's when I realized I need to Tai Chi these guys, because there's no winning. Right. You're not going to win in a 2-minute debate with these guys. So that's why I started, like that clip that's online you're talking about. This lady started yelling at me, and I just Tai Chi'd it. She was like, "You cannot talk about our president," or whatever. And I'm like, what a great country that you can express yourself. Yeah. Oh my God. You don't have to stay, but you can stay. I was very much just like, they just got her more and more riled up. But so 4 years, got used to sometimes someone be getting offended, and I got used to dealing with it in a very, Tai Chi type way. As you know how it is, as we evolve as stand-ups and we go to the next set or the next show, we come up with new material, and slowly we get rid of the old material, and that new material comes in. Well, around the time of the election, I was doing jokes about the election. And so there were still some Trump jokes in there. And then as I started touring, I was like, you know what? I'm going to have this segment. It's COVID. This segment is election/Trump. This segment is my kids. So I'm still doing some of the Trump stuff. And I did it in North Carolina recently. And there was a guy. So it's a shame that it had to be a white guy who kind of fit the mold, but he fit the mold. So when the show starts, he's sitting in the front, and you know how people who come to comedy shows know there's these tables, and if you're at the front of the table by the stage, they're going to seat another couple behind you, another couple behind you, another couple. So you're kind of stuck in that front. Like if you have to get up to go to the bathroom, everyone will see in the show that you got up because you're right by the stage. So when the show starts, this guy, I don't know, let's call him David or something. He's sitting there with his wife, white couple. My opening act, Tehran, he's very funny. He goes up on stage, and I'm watching the monitor in the back, and I hear Tehran talk to this guy right away. He's like, "Oh, you're going to throw your mask on the stage like that?" And he does crowd work a lot, but he's doing crowd work and keeps talking to this guy. And I didn't realize until I went on stage, what had happened was as soon as Tehran came on stage, this guy had taken his mask and like thrown it, because he's right there he's right by the stage. So I don't think he meant to be rude. Tehran is an Iranian black guy. So he's black. So I don't think the guy was like, "Oh, hey, I'm throwing something at you." I think he just was like, "Where am I going to put my mask? I'll put it on the stage." And Pete, when somebody that's in the audience like puts a foot on the stage or puts their elbow on the stage, we always were like, make yourself comfortable. That's not, I'm not performing up here. Just do your thing. Anyway, this guy throwing his mask on stage. Tehran did some stuff with him. And I could see, like, in doing his crowd work, Tehran sometimes will be like, yeah, blah, 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 blah. The news networks are like, there's CNN and there's MSNBC. And then he'll look at the white guy and be like, and there's Fox, making all the right-wing references to this guy. And I'm sitting there watching. I go, is this guy, we're in North Carolina, and he's at my show. Is this a guy who just came to a show and perhaps he's like right-wing, nut job? Anyway, I get up on stage, start doing my act. There's one bit I start doing about the insurrection. And the bit about the insurrection, I'll just kind of do it for you. I want to hear it. So basically the bit is I go, yeah, I got a cold during the coronavirus. And I go, you can't get a cold during the coronavirus because everyone thinks you got the coronavirus. Yeah. I say, getting a cold during the coronavirus is what it felt like being a Muslim after September 11th. Everyone thought we were terrorists. I go, white guys, this is what it feels like being white after January 6th. Nice. And I go, that was you mother, effers. I don't know if you can cuss on this show or not. And then I was watching the news. I remember watching, going like, oh shit, they got terrorists too. And now I'm kind of having fun with the white guy. Again, in LA, they've laughed with me. They've been with me because then I go on and make fun of this insurrectionist. Over there, I don't know if this guy supported those guys or not. So do it. I get to my Trump jokes. Pete, I could see as I'm doing the show out of the corner of my eye, this guy is so upset. He stops looking at me. He starts looking the other way. He starts looking at his wife. His wife is looking at him like he is about to explode. His wife looks at me almost pleading, going like, please stop with the Trump jokes. By the way, my Trump jokes were not at all like, he's a stupid idiot. They were kind of like, they start with me saying, I've had to deal with this because my own mom wanted to vote for Trump.
Right. That's good. That's a good way.
I'm saying I have relatives. Yeah. And then I could see the other people in the section all looking at him because he's in the front.
Were they with him?
Huh?
Do you think were they with him?
No, they were going like, oh my God, look at that guy. He's losing his shit. Like you could tell. He constantly, and now everyone's getting uncomfortable because of his discomfort. And I'm like, okay, I just got to get through this portion and move to, because earlier on, I'd done some jokes about like, doctors doing Zoom consults and how does that work? What are they? Because usually a doctor's got to touch you. So what are they like? Do they say like, grab your balls and cough and then stick your finger in your ass? Do you feel anything strange? So earlier on,
is my camera on? I'm doing this on my own without a doctor's appointment. I want to riff on that one. That's a hilarious premise. Go ahead.
Riff. So he laughed at those, but now he is just, about to explode. Anyway, I finally get through it. And they stay because they were sitting right in the front. I guarantee you if they were sitting in the back, they would have gotten up and walked out. They stay, and that's it. And I go, thank you guys, good night. And then I realized, I go, you know what, man? It's not worth it. It's like Trump is, in my opinion, obviously he's still around. So if he says and does something new, then it's worth commenting. But to go, let's talk about the election and get this reaction from people, it's just not worth it because it alienates, because you can still jab them without them. I'm still doing my January 6th joke. I'm still you'll know what side I'm on. You'll know how stupid I think it is to, for example, not get your vaccination. You'll know how stupid I think it is to make, to think that Dr. Fauci is behind it all or whatever that stuff is. You'll be hearing my points of view. By the way, these people are now so radicalized, where it's not even just the Trump thing. I mentioned Dr. Fauci last night in front of this Armenian crowd. I think they bought into, or some of them had bought into this idea that Fauci is, somehow, because now the Republicans are trying to say Fauci should be blamed for a lot of this stuff and, that he should step down or whatever. So they're on a lot of this shit and it's crazy. It's just nuts.
It's really interesting to get the point of view of a stand-up comedian on this, because comics traveling all over the country, in your case, all over the world. And you really can. You did a good job explaining how you can feel someone in the audience getting uncomfortable, but I think it's probably probably it's people can understand it, but you really can see people getting shifty and getting uncomfortable. And this has been the case forever about any subject matter that we know might be touchy, but now it's just way different. And it's interesting too, because it's always the whites. It's always the whites. And so as a white, one of the good ones, I sometimes feel like I have to be like more transparent with people. I'm like, nah, I'm not nuts. I know I look like a Trump supporter.
Let me make you feel good. It's not only the whites. A lot of Persians, a lot of Arabs, a lot of people a lot of immigrants that I know fell in with this guy. And that blows my mind. Because I go, how could you be the first argument that I had when I was yelling with that guy in the Improv, he was an immigrant, an Iranian immigrant who didn't immigrate as a baby. He'd come in when he was 13, because that's part of the conversation. Like I was doing the Trump jokes and he starts going like, well, he's done this, that, the other. He's good. And I go, I go, what's your background? He goes, I'm Iranian. I go, well, what do you feel about the travel ban? Because the travel ban is affecting actual Iranians who have family or want to come study here or whatever from coming. I go, do you sympathize? And he's like, no, it's good. It keeps terrorists out. I go, wait a minute. I go, when did you come? He goes, I came when I was 13. I go, whoa. So you took advantage of the immigration policy.
There'll always be people who, not just immigrants, but I feel like there'll always be people who will take advantage of a policy, or they'll walk through a door and then close it and lock it behind them. There will always be a lot of people who will take, that opportunity, walk through that door and make sure nobody else can. It's a really gross kind of behavior. I'll never really understand that, but
it's illogical. I'm seeing now these people who are complaining about, Biden this, Biden that. I go, hey, dude, you cashed your stimulus check that the guy got passed. All right. You're taking it. You got the vaccination. You're taking it. Like, at what point does somebody wake up and go, oh, wow, this socialist agenda that was supposed to take over the country and the stock market was going to crash and I wasn't going to have a job? It's not happening. Matter of fact, it seems like the opposite is starting to happen. And the whole thing of they're going to take your guns. When has anyone ever in this country, we have more guns now than ever before, but it's amazing how good they are. Somebody was saying this about how good they are at messaging on the right and making people, they go off of fear. Obviously fear is a big, big inspiration. And so if you go, oh my God, if this guy wins, ooh, look out.
Yeah, it's always worked, but it's more, you can talk about socialism or capitalism, you can talk about economics, you can talk about guns. But I mean, the thing that's the most fascinating to me is that the right now doesn't believe in democracy anymore. They don't. It's interesting too, because this is also is a personality characteristic, this idea of cheating and being okay with cheating to win anything from a golf match to stealing comedy material to an election. I don't care if I fairly won or lost the election. I'm going to do whatever it takes to overturn it. They're going to overturn elections that they lose. They're never going to be okay with losing election. That's new. Republicans used to concede at every level, state, federal, and, everything in between. And now it's Trump didn't concede, and neither will any future Republican. And they don't want people to vote. So all these other issues that we talk about, that we argue about, that you mentioned, economics, and I mean, they're used to make people afraid, but they're just a bunch of cheaters now. And they don't care about democracy. They're authoritarian fascists. That's how I see it.
Yeah, you're right in that. And I was listening to Ezra Klein interview Barack Obama yesterday, and he was talking about how, just numbers wise, there's when it comes to the Republicans, they're a minority versus the Democrats majority in numbers wise. But the system is rigged in a way where the Republicans, when they're in power, they're more effective with getting their laws passed than we can be. Like we are right now trying to get infrastructure, as well as the Voting Rights Act, as well as we weren't even able to get the stupid commission done. And it's frustrating sitting here and going like, wait a minute, we're a majority and this is what's happening. And it reminded me a little bit of a place like Iraq under Saddam. Saddam was part of the Sunni Muslims, and they were controlling a majority that were Shiite Muslims.
Yep.
So when we went in and took Saddam out, all of a sudden the fighting started between these two, and especially the Shiites going, how could we be a majority and you guys are doing this? in the back of my mind, I was like, I wonder if there could be a civil war here again. I don't know. I mean, definitely the people on the right, there's people on the right who are gearing up for it. So I have no idea if we're headed that way, because it's like, I hope not, but you're absolutely right. Once one of the guys you're playing with is okay with always grabbing his ball and going home and going, no, you go, wait a minute, I beat you fair and square, 21-15. Nope, you didn't.
Well, it's the same. It's just also the idea of just not only cheating and winning, but just not caring about other people at all. You know, like the mask controversy and the vaccine controversy now. Like, no, you're not getting your vaccine or your mask necessarily for yourself. It's for the community. And this idea, this is a very American thing, you know? I mean, it's an individualist, rugged individual, whatever you want to call it. It's just so stupid. It's not how it's anti-scientific by the nature of human beings. We're tribal, just like every other species. Like, we have to work together, just like a school of fish. You can't just go out on your own. There's no such thing. You need other people.
It's also this country. Sorry to cut you off there, but
I was only thinking about the guy who lives off the grid. He technically, you know, Ted Kaczynski. You know.
Yeah, but there's also this thing with American liberty and independence where some people feel that they know everything, and there's nothing more dangerous than the person who doesn't know anything but thinks they know everything. Mm-hmm. And so I've always been someone who defers to experts. Listen, doesn't mean experts don't get it wrong. Of course they get it wrong, but hopefully you do enough research, and based on that research, you then, you know, move through this world. So let's say, for example, you had a lump growing out of your head. You go talk to every doctor that deals with this. You go, what would you do? What would you do? What would you do? One guy says it's a diet thing. The other guy says we got to operate. The other guy says, you put it all together, you make a decision. Yeah. And it doesn't mean that decision is going to be the right decision, but at least we took an informed decision and we got somewhere. Now you've got, because of the world we're living in, people who will just, you know, say, I know more than Dr. Fauci. I know more than whoever. Like a lot of these people, somebody was saying when it came to the vaccine, somebody was saying, I'd rather listen to Joe Rogan than to Bill Gates. And I'm going, okay, I know Joe Rogan. I don't think Joe Rogan is on a crusade to tell people don't get your vaccination. I heard what he said, and I bet you if you talk to him a little bit more, he would say, look, it's your own decision.
Well, he later admitted, apparently he's like, don't listen. He later admitted, he's like, don't listen to me, I'm an idiot. And people should know that. But my thing with that is like, granted, I have a lot of friends who are physicians, and the nature of my work, know a lot of policy experts, and so there's a lot of access there. But my bottom line is like, my best friend from growing up is a evolutionary biologist. He has a daughter. My other best friend is probably one of the best researchers in the country, Dr. Aaron Carroll. He has a daughter. They're both getting their daughters vaccinated, and they're around my daughter's age. So I didn't listen to any podcasts. I didn't do any research. I just know that they love their daughters as much as I love mine, and that I trust them with my life, and certainly trust them with my daughter's life. So I trust them. That was my critical reasoning on that. They're getting their kids vaccinated. They do the research. They speak the language. They trust the vaccine for their kids. So do I. Period. That's it. I don't need to look anything up.
Absolutely. And listen, these people who are against it would be like, well, you're an idiot. You're just listening to the status quo, and you should do your own research.
No, you should never do your own research. You don't know how to do research. You don't know how to do it. Doing a Google search is not research. Reading a paper, reading an abstract of a research paper still isn't doing research. Unless you have a white coat and beakers and data, and you speak the language and know what the acronyms are, then shut up, dummy.
Absolutely. And also, listen, my final take on all this, because I ended up talking to my Uber driver, was like a 40-something-year-old Russian guy, the Uber driver, to the airport to go to Dubai. And then when I was in Dubai, I ran into another guy who was in his early 40s, late 30s. Both of them said, I'm not getting the vaccination because it's too fast, not enough research. And I said, well, what you got to do is, and I encourage them both. I go, talk to your doctor friends. The majority of them have gotten it. But secondly, I go, we don't know what's going to happen with this vaccine. You're right. Maybe five years from now, we all walk around with tails. Fantastic. Whatever. But we do know what happens with COVID. And I think that as human beings, we all have this way of thinking that we think we're invincible. It's not going to happen to me. It's not going to happen to me. But it can happen to you, and it will happen to you. And you can have long-term effects. You can have, I mean, that's the problem is these people aren't doing that math. They're just going, well, I don't know what the vaccine's going to do.
There's a lack of critical, there's just the lack of the ability to think, which reminds me, just anything can happen. I've got to do my live read for body armor now. Folks, you can get shot anytime in America, and that's why you need body armor. I was listening to Ben Shapiro, and he does a live read for body armor for real.
Are you serious?
Yeah, and it was he did the read right after he got done talking about Biden and quote scientists wanting to control you and make you afraid and control your behavior, and then he did a live read that you need body armor. I'm like, what?
Listen, this idea of fear,
body armor,
buying into fear. It's crazy. And by the way, this Ben Shapiro, just like that other guy, gotta forget his name. They look the same. The other guy who started Turning Point,
Charlie Kirk. I know them
Charlie
all.
Kirk.
I know them all.
They talk fast, and maybe they're book smart, but in many ways they're total idiots. Like I remember one time, I tried to listen to Ben Shapiro for a minute, and he was like, "No, I'm not homophobic, and I'm not, against gay. I have friends that are gay, but I just wouldn't. If my friend was getting married, I wouldn't go. I wouldn't go to the marriage because of whatever my beliefs." I go, "Well, you just lost me with your logic. Like you totally." Then you're an asshole. Yeah. And
by the way, that's the same, that kind of thinking is exactly how I define today's worst kind of racism, because, I have a lot of black friends. I love black people. I have no problem with black folks. I just don't think that they should be able to vote. There's nothing more racist than preventing people from voting. If you're voting for politicians that are making it harder for black people to vote when they vote and how they vote, that's the most racist thing you can do. Really?
It's crazy how they've turned all this. So I have a group of conservative friends who are like on social media, like on some WhatsApp with me, and they'll be like, oh, blah, 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 BLM this, BLM that. And I go, the core, like, I don't know what happened. One of the ladies who was one of the heads of BLM bought a couple of houses or something. And they were claiming that somehow she took the money from BLM to buy the houses. There's definitely there's no dots being connected. I don't know what the story is. And even if there were one official who's in this organization who's corrupt, that's many organizations have that. But the point is, let's admit, they won't admit that there is this systemic racism. There is this thing that got us to where we are. And we need to, they still believe in, less taxes, trickle down economics. Hey, dude, you keep buying nice cars and boats. You ain't helping anybody.
Have you ever asked them to talk to you on your show?
I've not, and I don't know if I want to, because
I want to meet you. I want to triple team them. Well, by the way, BLM is often in a lot of different places. It's registered as a nonprofit. They're not, there's no national BLM, but if you run a nonprofit, you make money. I have no problem with activists making money off of their activism. It's not a controversial thing to me, as long as you're not, grifting and lying about it. But if you're doing work to change, community organizers, activists, I got no problem with it, because you're making the community, you're creating change. But I want to switch gears with you, because I'm talking to a lot of people, especially comedians, men, about man stuff. And I really think that this country has a challenging issue dealing with trying to understand men. America doesn't know what to do with men, and men of a certain age, for sure, don't know what to do with ourselves. And I wonder, my question to you specifically is, did you make any new friends? Who did you talk to during the pandemic? I had all kinds of new relationships evolve as a result of this podcast, as a result of using the Marco Polo app. I don't know if you've ever used that, but I wonder how you are. Do you have close male friends? Do you have new male friends? And how vulnerable, how much do you let guys in? You're the perfect guy to talk to about this.
I think, first of all, I became distanced from some older friends because of the elections, because of the
Understandable.
Pandemic. I had some friends that were close who started sending me videos, these conspiracy videos about how Dr. Fauci was, it was a pandemic. And at first I didn't even understand. I go, wait, are you being serious? And then I realized they were. And then I realized, they've gone kind of into that QAnon world. So there's a couple of them where I go, look, I might have had a lot in common with them, but I go, gosh, as I'm seeing this, it's hard for me to even want to hang out with that guy. Because in the back of my mind, the whole time I'm going, we see this world so differently. And every issue that came up, from the pandemic to the BLM protests, to the election, they were always on the other side of I was like, oh, BLM, we can all agree that, there's racism problems, right? No, Black people got to pull themselves up by the bootstraps. I go, you know what? You lost me. I'm out. So I definitely lost some friends. In terms of making friends, I mean, like you said, there's been, people through my podcast that I've met that are cool and I agree with, or I should say have interesting, points of view that I can get along with. There's not, I probably leaned into the family more during this pandemic. I still have an old friend who lives in Spain who once in a while we get on the phone and catch up and talk, and it's great.
Men don't know how to talk to each other. I'm gonna generalize. Men don't know how to talk to each other very well, and even that's very typical. What you said, every once in a while I talk, and you have a great talk with them because you didn't talk in a while. But in general, when we meet people, we certainly don't open up very quickly. We don't do it very often. It's we got our long trusted friends, like you're talking about, but we just don't. We often. I mean, I'm generalizing like crazy, but I think this is the problem. We just don't have these thoughtful, vulnerable conversations about our insecurities and stuff, and it creates such emotional trauma, I think. I would say sometimes comedians, we end up having good conversations at the clubs. That's true. Because there's a lot of stuff, because also sometimes it'll start with career stuff and then transition into relationship stuff. So I've had some great conversations at the clubs. I tend to want to talk about those things, but you're right. When I first meet somebody, I don't necessarily go down that path. There's some couples who are family friends that they came over for some drinks and stuff, and once in a while with the guy we'd have conversations. But yeah, I think women definitely go deeper, and obviously my wife's always talking to some friend of hers in a very deep way, whereas I have, out of that group of guys, there was one or two that remained close. So we would start the conversation by talking about what the hell's going on with so-and-so. And he's like, I don't know, man. He's got a lot of issues. Well, how you doing now? So it would evolve into that. So there's some of that. Before I let you go, it does look like your schedule. I went on mazjobrani.com, and you're booked through the end of the year. Your career hasn't taken a hit. It's interesting to watch, us come out of the pandemic, and I'm talking to a lot of comedians who can't get booked, really good comedians. I mean, I've not been trying that hard, but for years, because it has been my top priority. But I mean, and you've been a very successful guy with a big following. But have you seen much change around the business of live entertainment, specifically comedy? Because you are all over the place. You're in New York at the end of next week, then you're in Texas in July, and a couple different dates in Texas and Florida and Vegas, and you're all over the place. You're back in Jersey, you're in Boston, Denver. Well, first of all, got two kids in private school, so I got to keep touring. Secondly, I'm excited to tour in terms of just being out there and doing my thing. But I'm actually going, before things started to open up, I was doing a lot of outdoor shows, and the comedy fans were coming out, and I thought, wow, this is going to be like the Roaring 20s. As soon as this hits, people are going to come out and laugh and laugh and laugh. And I was experiencing that somewhat with some of the LA clubs, the Comedy Store, Laugh Factory, those places, where I was like, oh, this is great crowds. As I started going on the road, like I said, those issues I was running into where I was like, oh my God, some of my stuff might not play as well in one place as it will in the other place. And also because we've got this political divide that we've been talking about the whole time. I'm a little curious as to how it's all going to play out. I wonder if I do this tour and my fans come with me and they're like, I love it. It was all new. I'll keep coming back. Or they're going to come and be like, oh, you're brainwashed libtard. I'm never going to come to your show again. I don't know. I don't know how it's going to play out because it's not just the pandemic that happened, but a lot of political divisions that have been happening. And it's not that my show's fully political. It's just that once they see enough of those points, perhaps they won't come with me. I'm hoping they do. I'm hoping I'm still funny. I will tell you the past 3 or 4 times I've performed in some of these different places, I've been like, is it me? Because I keep waiting I'm like, maybe I got to get back to that other place. So I'm doing clubs in town this weekend in LA, and I'll let you know if they laugh. I feel like I've got a future in comedy. Well, I think you're going to be just fine no matter what, but I do hope you capture everything on video. So if there are more of those weird, awkward conflicts, because I am fascinated when that happens. Not as much as I am by your comedy, but I always am. Finally, your podcast is great. That's why I reached out to you, and I have been friends for a long time. But I was listening to your podcast, and I was really enjoying it. Tell people about Back to School.
Yes, Back to School with Maz Jobrani. You're going to be on it because I love you. And it just started. The idea started with my kids would ask me questions I didn't have the answers for, so I decided to go to experts to just learn and have fun learning. And originally I had a lot of different scientists and people like that on, but it's become an excuse to just talk to interesting people. And you know how it is. The more you do this, the more you realize, wow, there are so many stories, so many interesting stories, because we all, in our worlds, we're all very selfish. You wake up, you think about your schedule, you think about what you got to do, you think about your story, you tell your story to others. But when you start listening to other stories, you go, holy moly. And a lot of those stories are inspirational. A lot of those stories are, there was a guy who helped land the rover on Mars. I had him on my show. There was a lady who was a cave diver who goes underneath caves to help find organisms to be studied by scientists. There's just a lot of interesting people. Just had Ricky Williams on, the NFL football player.
He's got to be pissed that he got in trouble for smoking weed, and now the NFL is exploring how weed is really helpful to guys that have concussions.
Dude,
did you talk to him about that?
Yeah, well, I asked him. I said, when did you start smoking weed? And he tells the story. He goes, I was my senior year, University of Texas, the year he wins the Heisman. He goes, I just done a game where I rushed for 40 yards, horrible game. My ex-girlfriend was dating the quarterback, so I was just in my head and I was in a bad place. My roommate, he goes, was a weed guy. And my roommate goes, you need to smoke some weed. So he goes, I smoke weed with my roommate. We start watching Blazing Saddles. I just laugh all night. All that stuff just leaves my mind. And he goes, the next 2 games, I had back-to-back 300-plus yard games. And I go, well, there you have it.
I've seen it with my life for the whole time I've been using it. Also, you've had former Treasury Secretary or Labor Secretary Robert Reich, but I did not realize you. So, what's your relationship with Adam Carolla? He came on your show. He strikes me as a guy who's gone way, way, way off the deep end. But I don't know. I haven't listened to him.
Well,
he's not a QAnon guy or anything.
No, he's not a QAnon guy. I've done his podcast in the past, and I thought, you know what, he'd be good to talk to. I try, like you said, I try to be very central when I get these people on. I'm not like, it's not it's not a crossfire.
You can talk to anybody. Yeah.
Yeah, I want to understand you. So I asked him some of those questions, like, what are your thoughts on cancel culture? What are your thoughts on this? And I think we had a little bit of disagreement on some stuff, but I'm still able to talk to him because he hasn't gone so far where it's just super crazy, where he didn't say like, oh, the Democrats and the pedophilia. He was talking about how cancel culture back in the day when he first started, he goes, if I got a call from the head of the radio station saying we got some letters written, he goes, it used to be the religious right. He goes, now when someone says they're upset at me, it's somebody on the left who's upset about something I said. And I said, okay, fair enough. I get it. But I said, I personally still get criticized from people on the right. So, I don't know what you want to call it, but it's been around for a long time. And I would say the right invented it.
Well, I look forward to hearing that. Back to School with Maz Jobrani. Follow him on Twitter, where he's great, on Instagram, and see him live. Go to MazJobrani.com, and he's, like I said, touring all over the country. And you know what? You should put me on one of those dates at one point, just so we can hang out, because I don't feel like trying to get dates. Like, I'll just open for you. I'm a great fluffer, and then I just, more importantly, just want to hang out with you. We'll do the podcast together.
How far are you from New Jersey? You're in New Jersey, aren't you?
Yeah, I'm right on the border. Why? When are you in New Jersey?
I'm doing Newark in the fall.
Yeah.
Come be a part of that.
Yeah, I definitely will. I'll do anything to hang out with you.
Beautiful. Love that.
Great to see you. Thanks for joining me, buddy. I really appreciate it.
Take care, my man. Be well.
All right. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope you liked that conversation. MazJobrani.com. Follow him on Twitter and on Instagram, and tell him you heard him here and see him live. I gave you some of the dates earlier, but you can go to his website and get all of them and see him. Such a great guy, such a nice guy. As are you for listening to this show, especially if you're supporting it with a paid subscription, because I can't do it without that. Go to patreon.com/Pete Dominic if you haven't already. I really appreciate it. Or the paid subscription link in every day's show notes. And you can become part of our community. Meet up with us every Thursday night at 8 p.m. this week, Wednesday, because my dad is taking us to Cape Cod. Did I tell you that? Yeah, Mom and Dad are taking Val and I and the girls to Cape Cod from Thursday to Sunday this weekend. So really looking forward to that. and looking forward to hearing from you. Email me, standupwithpete@gmail.com. Gotta go. I'll talk to you tomorrow. I love you. Bye-bye. Take it away, John Carroll.
When you can't see the forest for the burning trees, you got to stand up. Hey, you've been sitting so long, you got the creaky knees, you got to stand up. Stand up. I think you're driving wheels been leaking grease. Boy, you better stand up. Stand up. Well, there's a whole lot more of us who know what's right. They'll keep right on ignoring us if we keep sitting tight. You got to open up the window to let in some light. You got to stand up. That's right. You got to rise up. You got to stand up. You got to stare the devil straight in the eye. We got to let him know it's his turn to go. See it clear and all you hear is a lie. Don't get up off of your butt, get down off of your fence. Even if it ain't a very friendly audience, well, they'll begin to listen when you start making sense and you stand up. Stand up. No need to point your rifle to defend your town. Just stand up. Stand up. You know they can't deny you what you're laying down. Boy, you better stand up. Stand up. Show your face of every color, yellow, black, red, and brown. She's the place where every lost child will finally be found. There's only one thing to do before we stand our ground, and that's stand up. Stand up. Well, the founding fathers saw a land for all. They had to stand up. They had to stand up. They had a keen imagination for a crystal ball, drawing all the plans of stand up. But all they had to go on was the time they were in, with other causes for laws, and since they weren't even sin, they knew that change was gonna come before the change could begin. They had to stand up. All right, they had to stand up. We got to stand up. We got to look the devil square in the eye. We got to let him know it's his time to go, and make it clear when all we hear is a lie. Why you lying awake wondering where the money all went? It'll be the cost of freedom that'll go unspent. You can see him flee the scene of that experiment if you stand up. All right, we got to speak up, we got to reach up and raise your voice in every way you know how. Don't be toes up, you got to show up. Ain't no better time to do it than now. No need to pledge allegiance to no wanton tribe. Rise up, show obedience to the voice inside, and listen well and hear